Hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome to this edition of the Principal's Office. I am so glad you can join me. Everybody that's watching online, everybody who's listening live on Clubhouse in the Igniting Champion Leaders Club. I'm so glad to see you. Now, yes, this is called the Principal's Office, and no, you do not have to be an educator to be in this space. That's just the name of this video podcast that I do, where I talk about leadership. And I use a lot of school examples because I am a former school principal with the grace to have turned around schools that were struggling, accelerated the progress of other schools. But now I ignite champion leaders. I ignite leaders to facilitate change as the CEO and co-owner of Lead Like a Champion. And so this week, before I start, I want to remind you, if you're watching us live, excuse me, or watching a replay, feel free to let me know in the comments. But remember to like, comment, share this video. Those of you who are listening live on Clubhouse, let me know in the chat. I see you. Hey, everybody. April, Daisy, Jeanette, Coach Paul, Dominique. I see you guys. Coach Nita, Latasha, and if you're listening in the replay, also let me know as well. And so today we're going to get right into it. We're talking about shared leadership and shared responsibility. There's this concept in leadership that a lot of people talk about where they say shared leadership. And so it's very important to be able to understand what shared leadership is and what it isn't, because many people have an expectation when it comes to shared leadership that might not meet reality and will cause confusion when their expectation doesn't meet the reality of what you're walking out as a leader. But also, as a leader, it's important for you to understand what shared leadership is, because leadership is not about being the superhero where you're doing everything, or where you're the guru leader, as I call it, where you're the keeper of all knowledge, because that's not good either. Shared leadership is about increasing, it's about distributing the leadership responsibility and increasing the capacity of those you're leading to step into their leadership. A lot of people talk about duplicating themselves as a leader, and I always advise against that. As a leader, you don't want to duplicate yourself. You want to multiply the leadership, the leadership of the building or of the organization you're leading, which is totally different. If you try to duplicate yourself, then you're trying to get someone to lead like you, act like you, and make decisions the same way you would, which might not necessarily be good in a sense of the person you are developing or helping to grow. They need to learn how to make decisions, but they need to learn how to make decisions the way that they would, as long as they accomplish the vision. They also need to learn their own way of leading versus trying to imitate someone else's leading. I always teach this, and I want you to remember this. Leadership is an art because it's an art form to connecting with people. It's a science because there are specific principles that you apply in leadership, but it's also a spiritual gift. You know, the Bible talks about it being a gift of grace. And so when it comes to that, those three aspects of leadership, because everybody knows that leadership is spiritual. There's research about that as well that's talked about. And so when you're talking about those three dimensions of leadership, trying to get someone to lead like you or trying to duplicate yourself will only cause that person that you're helping develop not to step into who they are as a leader. And so it's very important to really distinguish that when we're thinking about and talking about and implementing shared leadership. Now, here's the thing with shared leadership. A lot of people want to become leaders simply because they want to have more input in the decision making. They want to be a part of initiating change to ensure the vision is a reality. And I'll tell you, that was my thought. When I was a classroom teacher and I had leadership responsibility, I was leading my team. I was leading after school tutoring. I was leading summer school. I was leading every chance I could get. However, when I felt the call to become a principal and to increase my influence and to step into a greater role of leadership and greater responsibility, it was my initial thought was I want to be a part of the decision making. I want to help make decisions, and I want to make sure that decisions are made that accomplish the vision. And so a lot of people have that same thought when they're thinking about leadership. They want to be a part of initiating change. They want to be a part of the solution, which is good. But here's one thing I want to hit you with. And you should write this down if you're taking notes or if you have the opportunity. More input requires more output. I'll say it again. More input requires more output. The more input you are able to give towards a thing, the more input you want to have in terms of the vision and the execution of that vision, the more input you want to have in making decisions and seeing how things roll out, the more output. Meaning this, the more you contribute to the strategy of executing and ensuring the vision is a reality, the more or the greater the requirement will be upon you to help with that execution. Because a lot of people want to have input without actually getting output. Too many people desire to have say so in how things happen and how things go, but don't want to actually step into the responsibility of initiating and executing strategy. And so when you think about shared leadership, you have to think about the more input someone wants to give and the more input you want to give someone else, the more responsibility and the more should be required of them. It's not like a drive-by idea where they just come, say what they want to say, and then roll out and now dump more work on you as the leader. Because as a leader, you should be the delegator of work and not the receiver of people delegating work to you. And a lot of times when you are in leadership, people would try to delegate work to you that are not your supervisor, not your direct report, or whatever the case may be. And so you got to avoid people putting work on you as the leader and trying to tell you what you should and shouldn't do. A lot of people have ideas on how things can go, but they're seeing it from a different vantage point. While their vantage point can help you, but also you got to understand that they are not seeing the totality or the entire picture simply because of their vantage point. So you want to use the feedback of others, use the suggestions of others, but don't let it be the sole thing that runs you. You have to be the one who influences them and not allowing someone else to run you. And so here's the thing. Here's the next statement I want to make. A lot of people may want to contribute their thoughts and ideas, but at the same time are unwilling to yield their gifts, their talents, their abilities, and their time. I'll say that part again. Many people want to contribute their thoughts and ideas, but they are unwilling to yield and give their gifts, their talents, their ability, and their time. And that's not really getting involved. That's actually a form of control. They want to tell you how to lead, tell you what you should do, tell you how you should do it, tell you what things should look like, but are unwilling to help you either through their time, their gifts, their talents, and their abilities. So basically, they want to lead without having the responsibility. They want things to go the way they want, and they want to seem like they're in charge without bearing the weight and the cost of leadership. And so you want to be careful when you're dealing with shared leadership, because some people want to lead without paying the cost or bearing the weight. And so you want to be able to tell the difference, because those who are willing to bear the weight and to pay the cost, those are the people you share leadership with. The people who don't, those are the people who are basically trying to manipulate and be the person behind the scenes, the person behind the person, and aren't really fruitful and are not going to help you in any way accomplish the vision. I remember one time I was assigned to a particular school to assist the school leader with turning around their school, and I was on assignment. And this person clearly said that he wanted to be the person out front and wanted me to be the guy behind him making things happen behind the scenes. And so I understood what he meant, but also what he said had a certain connotation. And it was like, basically, you want me to do all the work while you be the front man and get all the credit. That's not going to happen. But I will support you and put structures in place so that you can do what you do. And I had to clearly define what that relationship was going to look like. And so as a leader, when you're thinking about shared leadership, you have to define people's role that you're sharing relationship with so that they can sharing leadership with so that they can understand the expectation that you have and understand what they are to contribute beyond ideas and suggestions. And so because you don't want to be manipulated or controlled by someone who's trying to, in the name of shared leadership, who's trying to basically avoid doing work. And I'm going to tell you, that's a typical strategy and accusation of people who want, of controlling people who want to come against your leadership. They would say, oh, it's not shared leadership. You're not sharing in a decision making. I didn't know anything about this. I didn't have say so. Sometimes the people who need say so, or I would say this, the people who need say so are the people who are impacted by your decision. If they are not impacted by your decision directly or even indirectly, they don't need say so. And so that's just people being nosy. And so you want to make sure that you don't fall for that game that people play because they might not agree with your decision. So they will say, oh, it's not shared leadership. All you did was tell me this is how it is. Sometimes you may have to say this is what we're doing. Other times you want to use the democratic strategy and get input and have shared leadership, which is what we're talking about. But either time would depend on the circumstances. You cannot lead by committee. You can have a committee, but you can't lead by a committee. And you can't call a meeting every time you need to make a decision. And as the leader, you can't get permission from the people you are leading to make the decision. Now, people will give permission to their permission for you to lead them, and they will, and there is a level of leadership called the permission level where they give you permission to lead them and they basically choose to follow you. But at that same time, that doesn't mean you have to run your decisions by them every single time, because people have been so used to a dictator that they've gone to the opposite extreme that don't allow leaders to lead. Now, I'm not telling you to be a dictator because that's a bad form of leadership. But at the same time, you can't get into this soft serve kind of leadership where you can't do anything without people liking it, people approving it, or people giving you permission. Because while we need people to accomplish the vision, you also cannot lead people from a place of needing people. Because if you are so needy where you need people, you won't be able to be yourself to lead them in the direction that needs to happen. All right, so here's the next thing I want to tell you. If a person's role in the shared leadership in this shared leadership strategy, if a person's role is to simply help develop the strategy, then that's their role and that's it. And that's cool. And other people's role may be to help execute. That is okay. But you set that parameter at the beginning, because sometimes, especially in nonprofits, they might not be able to have the time to volunteer. Excuse me, they might not have the time to volunteer in order to execute. And so when you are assembling the team together, you let them know and let everybody know, okay, their role is to help develop the strategy. They're the strategists. And that's part of their assigned role, which is okay. But that's different than the drive-by idea dropper. Now, when you are leading, it's important to know the difference so that you can help people be in their right role between the strategist on your team and the person that's avoiding responsibility. Because the one that's avoiding responsibility, you don't want them involved in shared leadership anyway, because you're going to end up you or someone else is going to end up having to pick up the slack of the work that they're not doing. So you want to be careful with that. So I'm going to give you 3 key things to consider when you're looking at shared leadership. And I'm going to give them to them right now. Then those of you who are watching live, you can type something in on the comments. Those of you who are listening live, I want to hear your thoughts after I share these 3 things. So the first key area is decision making. When you're talking about shared leadership, you want to share and to get people's involvement in making the decision. You want to get their input. You want to get their perspective. You want to pull on their wisdom and their experience and their knowledge. You definitely want to do that. Now know that you have to have the final say so when it comes to that. Not that you're going to just automatically trump what they say because you don't agree, but you have to recognize that everything rises and falls upon you. And so the final decision ultimately has to rest on you because the responsibility will ultimately rest on you. And so you want to think about sharing decision making. So you want to think about who can make good decisions in this matter, and or who can I help develop to make good decisions in this matter. And so the second thing you want to think about when you talk about shared leadership is responsibility. Who will help and who will be responsible in terms of helping to lead in this area that they're helping to make a decision about? It's not them giving input and leaving, as I said earlier, but it's actually being responsible for something or taking on a level of responsibility and accountability in this area that we are making the decision about, and in this area where leadership is being shared and spread abroad. And the third thing ties close to the second one, which is execution. And when I'm talking about sharing leadership, that means the person has to help execute the strategy. And so you're helping, that person is helping make the decision, helping take responsibility for the decision, and they are now have to help execute the strategies that go along with the decision so that we can see this thing happen. And so that's how you share leadership. You share it through decision making, through responsibility, and through execution. And if a person isn't willing to commit to being a part of all 3, then they might not be the one you want to share leadership with, unless you are simply bringing them on board to be a strategist. Again, now, but the strategist will share in the decision making and the responsibility. They probably just can't share in the execution part. And so those are the 3 keys and 3 key areas you want to focus in on when we're talking about shared leadership. And so, of course, if you need help developing yourself or developing the people around you in order to do this thing called shared leadership, because it's not leading by committee, you can reach out to me. Now, those of you watching online, the Leadership Accelerator is open for enrollment. Just go to jamalmaxim.org strategy session, get on my calendar to find out more information, or you can go to jamalmaxim.org/LA info, which is LA for Leadership Accelerator info, to get more information about how I can accelerate your leadership and the leadership of your team that you're looking to share and distribute it with. So you don't want to miss the opportunity, because again, as a leader, you do not want to be doing everything on your own or trying to run around and do everything as if you're the superhero or the Lone Ranger trying to make everything happen. That is the quickest way to burn out and to not last and to not fulfill the assignment that you have as a leader. And so go to jamalmaxim.org/LA info, or you can just get on my calendar when you get there so you can enroll in the Leadership Accelerator. So everyone that's watching, that's it for this week's video podcast, this week's Champion Leadership Success Tip this week. I will see you tomorrow for the other podcast where I talk about dismantling spiritualism, and I'm going to talk about false authority, because as a leader, You want to make sure you're not engaging in practices or being a part of these inner circles that's using spiritualism, because it will produce a false authority. Remember, leadership is an art, a science, and a spiritual gift. There is a spiritual component, and there are a lot of leadership gurus who I've done research to confirm that as well. And so join me tomorrow for that podcast at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. I will be streaming live on all the platforms, but that podcast is specifically called Dismantling Spiritualism, and I will see you then. Those of you who are listening live in the room on Clubhouse, hang out, hang tight so we can do some Q&A. I can bring you to the stage, and I want to hear your thoughts on those 3 points. If you're watching live and you're not on Clubhouse, join me in the Igniting Champion Leaders Club right now so that you can get in on this live discussion, this live Q&A about shared leadership, and get your questions answered without having to get on the strategy session. This is the only time I answer questions without an investment, and I'm just be real with you. And so take advantage of this time. All right, so that's it for this week. I will see you next time. I will see you tomorrow. I want you to be successful and lead like a champion.